this is it. We're going to die. Oh. And I remember talking to my wife, and we just prayed.
So audio's good, video's good, record, storage is good.
Yeah. Make sure you get comfortable, and I don't know.
I mean, I'll probably move around a little bit.
If you want to adjust that mic, cause you kind of want it like about 4 or 5 inches, like right there, it's good for you. It's just however you want to be comfortable. If you're good right now,
I'm good right now.
Kick out. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, here we go. I just got to pretend you're just a normal person that we're sitting here with. But
I know. Yeah.
Today we are interviewing Bernard Toney Jr. This is an incredible opportunity. We just drove to Maryland, my wife and I did, and
it was about a 6.5 hour drive. So worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So committed.
Yeah. I looked him up online. Monica did initially, but I saw some footage and listened and talk a little bit about his story. But I just told him I'd rather hear a story directly from someone rather than hear him talking somebody else's podcast. So I shut it off immediately after he started talking, and I think I got the meat of the story. But it's so much better hearing something authentically from somebody.
Well, yeah, because then it's not like you don't know everything ahead of time. You're actually getting like fresh information from this awesome person.
Yes. And Bernard has an incredible history. His accomplishments are just
amazing.
He went through some extreme adversity when he was younger, and I listened to him talk about that. And then afterwards, joining the military, 21-year combat vet. Please correct me if I'm paraphrasing.
That's right.
And he 2018 to 2022, he was a medical officer at the White House for the president, vice president, and first lady.
That's right.
Yeah. And here I am sitting with this individual, which is in his house.
I know. We're so honored, and it's like kind of crazy. Like we hold people like you like up here.
Yeah.
Like very special human.
Yeah.
I really appreciate all the admiration, but I'm no different from anyone else in that regard. And thank you for taking the drive all the way down here.
Yeah, no problem at all.
And happy to open up my home to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
And as you know, our podcast is primarily about overcoming adversity. And if there's anybody that could, adhere, live up to that standard, it is you, because your story is absolutely awesome, especially, because your accomplishments are great. And, but I think accomplishments are, amplified when you know where somebody came from. And when somebody came from not nowhere, because where you came from, I think is very important, because that's created who you are.
Yeah.
It's give you probably gave you a newfound appreciation from, going through hardship and, what you went through. Do you have any specific spot you'd like to kind of start off where you would want to start?
Yeah, I'll let you drive the train on this. I'm happy to go into any part of my life that you want to explore. Where I can't obviously comment, I'll certainly make that known. But really wherever you feel like is most interesting for your audience, your viewing audience to start. Yeah,
and I think it's a cool dynamic, because I had an incredibly different upbringing than you.
Right.
Granted, I had parents still together, and they weren't poor, but they weren't wealthy by any means either.
Right.
And but I had a loving family growing up in the grand scheme of things. I had a pretty awesome upbringing. It's always depending on what you're comparing to. And
it's the same with me. Like my parents were divorced when I was like 3 or 4, but I still had a normal childhood. Nothing too crazy. Nothing where people are like, oh my gosh, that's insane and stuff.
Right.
Really. So I had a good childhood.
Yeah.
So it's different.
Yeah.
From what other people go through.
Yeah. You want to start just where did you grow up and
so we can definitely start. So I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I was actually born in Detroit. My parents are from Detroit, Michigan. They wanted to leave Detroit because of all of the the violence and things like that, and my parents wanted to build a different life. So my dad, after he did his time in the Army, he moved to Atlanta, Georgia, when I was about 2.5 years old. So I don't remember anything about Detroit, Michigan. And we moved to Atlanta, Georgia with like this fresh start. So that kind of explains why I really only know my nuclear family. I don't know much of my extended family very well. Yeah. So we moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and I had, for lack of better terms, a normal childhood, with the exception of the fact that we didn't have air conditioning in Atlanta, Georgia. And that's, that should be criminal. Yeah. But we had a pretty normal childhood. We grew up I would say on the edge of where people are on the margins of society. So we were, if I had to categorize us based on my memory, we were probably lower middle class. So we were not poor. But we definitely were kind of a paycheck to paycheck kind of family.
Oh yeah.
Grew up with my dad and my parents are still together. They're still married after 40 some odd years.
Awesome.
Nice.
So I have 2 sisters, one older, one younger, and we grew up in that kind of traditional nuclear family setting in Atlanta, Georgia. Really nothing strange there. But there was, again, when you're on that border of where things get a little bit tough, things kind of creep into your everyday life. So gangs, drugs, violence. I remember we even had a murder in our neighborhood, and like those types of things were always right on the edge, if you will. And so I was really no different from when you grow up in that environment, you don't know what you don't know. So I didn't know that we were on the lower spectrum of society as far as socioeconomically, because everyone was the same.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of reassuring. I mean, I had in that regard a pretty normal childhood.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I got a little bit older and I started having a little bit more adversity, and we can sort of go through all of that.
Yeah.
But a little bit more adversity along racial lines, a little bit more adversity along extreme violence, and we can certainly talk about that as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, awesome, man.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, especially where you came from, and I too, being on that similar path of having parents that were great parents. There were people that were significantly more successful, well off than my family and whatnot. But in the same token, I think I have a different type of respect because they really worked for everything they had.
But you felt probably when you're younger that you had everything you needed.
Yes.
You didn't think you needed all this other stuff because you're just used to having what you had and you're content, and happy, taken care of.
Had video games. That's all I cared about.
Yeah.
I didn't know about air conditioning though.
Yeah.
That was the thing.
You needed that. Why do we not have that?
We had many years without air conditioning, and even in New York, it does get 90, 100 degrees.
Yes. Yeah, we have AC.
Right.
Yeah.
But so at what age would you say you kind of started facing your adversity?
Yeah, so I would say about the age of 12-ish is when I started kind of facing more adversity. I started seeing life differently from what I had imagined. So I'll give you some context. So I grew up in a school that if you go on greatschools.org and you look up this school, I'm not going to name it because obviously I want to protect their information identity. But it was one of the lowest rated schools in all of Georgia. And so it's a 1 out of 10 school, if 10 being the best, 1 being lowest. And so out of that school, I actually performed pretty well compared to my peers. I don't know what that really means, but I compared to my peers, I tested better. And so I was chosen to go to this program called M to M, which was a minority to majority program. So busing essentially black kids or kids of color to all white schools. And so I did that. I was a part of that program. I went into this school, and the first day, if you can imagine, Atlanta was pretty divided along racial lines. It was almost like all the white people lived in one part of the city, all the white people lived in another part of the city. And so that's changed over the years. I would imagine, not dramatically so, though. It was still very racially divided. And so I would take a bus to this all-white school, and the first day I walked in, I just remember everyone looking at me, and I didn't know if they were looking at me because I was a new kid, or I was the black kid, but either way, I immediately started to feel very inferior, and so I acted out. I didn't do well in that school, and within 6 months, I was put back into my all-black school, and that's where I started to really become more attracted to things that were not what I appreciate and value today. I started, valuing people who were tougher looking, people who had money from nefarious means. Yeah. I started really looking at people who just, when you're growing up in that environment, whoever dresses the nicest, has the nicest car, has more gold or whatever it is at the time, that's the hero. It's not the doctor. It's not the lawyer. It's not, any of those things. And so I certainly started looking at that more because I felt like I had more comfort in that. I didn't feel like I had any comfort, let's say, in that all white school. And so that was one of the reasons why I ended up coming, kind of going back to my school.
So in like those 6 months when you're at school, with all the white people and stuff, did they all like treat you different, or was it just different energy?
It's hard to say. So yes, they treated me differently because I didn't belong there. Everyone's experiencing this shift. Like I'm not a part of that. I didn't grow up in that preschool, elementary school. That
They're
kind of
like, why is this guy here?
Why is he here?
Yeah.
The other part of that is there was no organic way to create friends, right? So as everyone's hanging out after school, I have to get on my bus to drive 45 minutes back to my neighborhood. So there's no natural, waiting at the bus stop with all the other kids. I have to get back on my minority to majority bus.
But I didn't have time to get to know each other.
Right. And so for all of those reasons, I think there was probably some personal ostracization, but there was also the system was designed in which it wasn't an organic, natural experience for kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sad that the teachers wouldn't push for people to socialize more with new people, regardless of race or whatever.
I think it was an experiment for us upon, at least from my experience, upon everyone. So the kids don't know how to deal with it as much. The teachers are they're just teaching. And now the school district is making decisions that they have to contend with. And so I think that was a challenge probably for everyone involved.
Yeah.
So before you left, did they try to say, no, stay, we'll like help you, kind of stay on track? Or were they just like, okay, if you don't want to try here, bye?
Yeah, I think it was the latter. I think I didn't do well enough there, and I shut down. So like I really didn't study. I didn't, I didn't do the homework, and so there was again this test to see if a person could achieve more in this environment. But I didn't meet the mark on that in that regard.
Probably had really bad imposter syndrome, I imagine.
Yeah. Like why me? Why here? Like all of those things. So all of that kind of started very, very early on.
Yeah. Oh, I've been dealing with that so bad.
He talks about it all the time.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to get over.
Yeah.
I don't know if people really ever get over it.
Yeah, and you can embrace it though. You can realize it's kind of it's a powerful thing. We found that out in the last couple months or so.
Yeah.
I realized the value in that because it's just you are an imposter. You
You don't know yourself.
Right.
Because you're changing.
Yeah.
Or different environments you're going into and you're not familiar with it and you're like, what's happening?
Yeah. Yeah. With this podcast, man.
Yeah.
It's different.
What is happening?
I'm talking to people I never thought I'd be talking to.
Right.
For sure,
Right.
But, yeah, and it's cool. My school, it was the complete opposite. It was I think we had one black guy in our whole school, and
go.
everybody knew him. And
that was like my school too.
Yeah. Granted, I think they were treated pretty good and stuff.
Yeah.
From what I can remember, I'm sure they may have a different perspective than I had, but
Maybe, yeah.
and I remember not to get caught off on a tangent. I remember my first black friend, and I would say his name. He's a very very good friend of mine. He
like in high school or like in school or
or late high school. Okay. And I just remember going out and, because, I had this image in my head, I didn't know any black guys.
Right.
And, in where I grew up, there was racism.
Right.
100%.
Right.
And, there was a stigma. And, once I was around this guy, I'm like, this guy's one of the most respectful, humble guys I've ever known in my entire life. And to this day, I'd say the same thing. And, kind of changed my perspective. I'm like, and then going into the Army, of course, you realize there's no color. There's good people, there's bad people in every race, sexuality, whatever, gender. I think the vast majority of people are great people, but that's me. But anyway, I'll let you continue off kind of where you were.
Yes, it's funny that you say that. My first white friend was actually in basic training, so that was the. So then I started to really find and have had an affinity for people who, for lack of better terms, they were more like gangsters, right? So they had money, at least in our scope of what money is. And I started trying to look more and act more like them. And so I started dressing a certain way. I remember I had a pager. I'm dating myself, but I had a pager. So at like 13 years old, and so why does this guy have this? And so that led me to my first, I would say, traumatic experience in which I was actually robbed at the age of 13 by gunpoint. And so that was kind of my introduction to the life that was well outside of the confines of my home.
Oh, wow.
My mom did what every mom does. She tried to call the police and figure out what happened. But after those guys ran away, there was really no way to find them.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was my first experience with having a gun to my head. That was my first experience with violence and what that can look like. And then I started to really lean into trying to be something that I'm not organically. So I believe I was at the age of 15. I went and got tattoos, these tattoos that are on me now. And I went and got 12 gold teeth, which was very, very jarring for a lot of people outside of my community. But
So through this whole process, what were your parents like? How did they, what did they think? And were they like, no, this isn't you? Or were they like, oh, he's just going through a phase? Or like, how did they act?
I don't know what maybe that's the question I should ask. I don't know what their thoughts were. They thought that I was a good kid, but then I started to struggle academically. So I failed the things that no one fails, like PE. Like, the only thing I had to do was dress out. So I failed PE.
Yeah.
I failed, I just didn't do well academically. So I don't know if they had, some sort of regret for the way that I was turning out.
Yeah.
But then again, you're a product of your environment. So for me, having all those gold teeth, I think my parents were like, what is my son doing? But that was also very commonplace in the South and in Black communities.
Oh, yeah.
So so it wasn't something that was very extreme. It was something that, okay, I guess he's turning into what he's turning into. So that's when I started really leaning into looking visibly vicious, like something that I'm not. Tattoos, gold teeth, all the things.
Intimidating.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of the mantra for a while, until like this very, what I would say was a turning point for me in my life. And so at 17, I was getting ready to graduate high school, which was a big deal. I think that even if I were to go back and look at the statistics for my high school, most people, well, let me take that back. I would say at least about 25% or so do not graduate. So maybe 3/4 of the people graduate. And of those 3/4 of people, many of them don't, graduation is kind of like, they're really working hard to get there. So it was a big deal for me. So me and my friend, we all went to a club. I recently found out what the name of that club was when I did a speech down in Georgia. And at the end of our partying at the club, I'm 17. We're all 17. My friends and I think there were 4 of us in total, including myself. We leave this club in Decatur, Georgia, and we go to a gas station because I needed more gas for my car.
Yeah.
And as I pull up to the gas station, almost, as I think about this, and it's really hard to imagine like what the time was from the time that I got there. But almost it felt like as soon as I got there, shots started to ring out. And then my car that I'm driving, I have my friend in the front and 2 friends in the back. And my car starts taking a lot of rounds. So if you can imagine, the shooters are shooting from the passenger side and I'm on the driver's side. And I started to, sort of duck and drive. But at the same time, I'm able to hear bullets piercing my car, bullets piercing the hood of the car. I remember there were even bullets in the engine block and the radiator. And so in that, my friend Ivan, he takes 1 bullet to the chest. He gets in the car and he starts to convulse, like he starts to shake, and he's shaking and I don't know what's happening. I almost think that he's joking because, you can't really imagine you just can't imagine someone that you're with getting shot.
Yeah.
So he gets back into the car, and he starts to shake and he leans over on me and blood starts to pool all over my arm and my hand. So I did what I can do. I pulled out of the kill zone essentially. And I drive about a mile down the road or so, and I pull him out of the car, and some other cars of other friends pull up as well, and they're saying, "Don't let him go to sleep. Don't let him go to sleep." I call 911. They're asking me questions like, "Where is he shot? Where are you?" If you can imagine, I'm 17. It's in the wee hours of the morning. I think it's probably like 1 or 2 a.m. I don't know the answers to these questions. It takes me a long time to get my bearing and figure out where I am.
Yeah.
And so in that time, he dies.
Yeah.
And so that was my introduction to what life can be.
I'm so sorry you had to go through that.
Yeah. And like, were you guys an intentional target, do you believe?
I don't know. I would say that that I don't know the kids. And I call them kids because I found out later, once I went to the court, to the trial, that they were 17 as well. We were all 17 years old. And so the two shooters were 17, and I remember testifying to what I remember in court. I don't know them. I don't believe they know me. I can't say that they knew or did not know my friend Ivan. Wow. So nonetheless, I was already committed to joining the Army at that point. I joined the Army through this delayed entry program.
Yeah.
And so I joined the Army. I'm already committed to leave on April 19th of 1999. Now you know how old I am. And so, but this was late March. This was like March 23rd.
Oh, wow.
This is Googleable. So you can actually just Google this murder. And that means that I'm in basic training 3.5 weeks later, rather. And so I'm still trying to wrestle with this decision that I made. I'm still 17 at the time. I'm now a soldier in the Army. My best friend was just shot and killed. Just imagining trying to start a new life in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in retrospect, it's like it created who you are. Maybe that was the most important thing that's ever happened to you. I imagine it had to have been, if not close to it. But, even going into basic training, I can't even begin to imagine, because, I was 27 when I went in.
Wow.
I was much more mature than everyone else. And I worked a couple of years in law enforcement. So
Okay.
I was kind of prepared. I was physically in pretty good shape. I was working out, and but even then I still can't, because I was fresh out of a divorce. That's why I joined. So, with 3 little kids and whatnot. So it was very difficult for me, but it's a very different kind of difficult,
Yeah.
So I just can't imagine
It's
having
still
to
like an
process
emptiness you're trying to cope with,
that. Yeah.
or trying to understand, and it's nothing you're ever going to understand.
Right.
Yeah. What was your MOS when you went in initially?
So I joined as these MOSs changed. So my military occupational skill was a Russian cryptologic linguist.
Okay.
When I joined. And so I think that's now it was 98 Golf at the time. I think it's something else now. And so after basic training, I was going to Monterey, California to learn Russian. And that was definitely an interesting experience as well.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Man, that's crazy. I initially thought, because did you do something? Were you a combat medic or something like that at any point?
Yeah, so that's
what I thought.
So that's after I failed Russian. So I failed Russian, and the premise of that was sort of going back to the M2M program, where I'm the black kid in a white space.
Yeah.
So I walk in, and everybody, as you might imagine, this is one of the better MOSs in the military. And so everyone's white. And so I walk into this, but that wasn't the thing. The jarring thing is now I have this, this dental aesthetic of all gold teeth.
Forgot about that.
Right, you forgot about that. So that wasn't fixed yet. And so I opened my mouth, and the people in the class were like, "Oh my God, what is going on?"
Well, just so she knows, the Army was a very different place back when because I joined in 2014. The Army was much, it was much stricter. I think it was much tougher in a good way, in a lot of ways, in my opinion. So I can't imagine going through basic training with those gold teeth.
It was jarring. People didn't know how to deal with it.
Right.
Even I've had, and we can kind of go through that, but I had people say this is not possible for him to be in the military like this. So I opened my mouth, and every time I opened my mouth, I remember people saying, what happened? Were you in a freak accident?
Yeah.
People call me Jaws. People call me from 007. They just didn't know what to. So again, I'm the black face in the white space. I have all these gold teeth. I look like a thug, which was the intent when I was in Atlanta, Georgia, right? But it doesn't do well in other environments, and so that made me shrink down. That made me feel much more like an animal. I felt like people, almost like in a zoo. People were like, hey, go look at them, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I ended up not. Same thing as when I was in middle school. I didn't do well. I was ashamed to open my mouth. I was ashamed to really speak, because when I spoke, there was this jarring sort of reaction.
Like they weren't listening to you at all. They're just
they're staring
looking
directly
at,
at my teeth, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't make it very long. I think I make it probably 5 months maybe. In a language that should take about 13 to 14 months. I fail, and then I go to combat medic school, and then I learn how to become a mental health technician. So I went to medic school and mental health technician school.
Cool.
And so I did that for a few years
Awesome.
before I started making some decisions to change.
Yeah, and our first guest on our podcast, he was my combat medic, and he actually talked about going to Afghanistan in 2012. He lost 3 soldiers to an IED death in Afghanistan on November 3rd, 2012. Sergeant Matt Kinney, and he'll be happy that I mentioned his name. He's a good friend of mine.
Right.
He's one of the few people, man. Because
good guy.
I'll get into kind of what I've been through a little bit.
Yeah.
What I'm able to talk about, but he's someone that's been there for me this last year. He's that guy that I've scrolled through my phone looking for people to talk to, and I've stumbled upon his name a lot, and he's answered my calls probably
Every
reluctantly sometimes, but he's always answered my call.
Right.
But yeah, so you've I say failed out, but you went over to be a combat medic.
Let's be honest, I failed out.
Okay,
I don't want to say it, but
and again though, I bet that was probably another thing. Hindsight 2020, you're probably happy with the end result of that, because again, look at who you become, and so
well, one door closes, there's going to be other doors opening for you that like what you're meant to do.
Right.
I wish I lived my life.
Right.
I wish I lived my life like that, because people think like, when you fail at something, like that's a horrible thing, and there's a lot of people that give up, and I think so many people fail and they don't know how close they were to success. Even if it's something they're siloed, they're intent on doing, or a dream or something like that. I think if you have faith, and you really believe in what's happening is meant to happen, man, that changes everything.
Right.
It's changed everything for us.
Yeah, it definitely has.
But I'll let you continue off where you were there.
So I go to medic school, and then I go to mental health school. So I'm in Fort Sam Houston for about 9 months or so. And at the time, it was the same experience where my instructors, I get there and they're like, this doesn't work. This is just inconsistent with Army values. And so I had a first sergeant who said, we have to kick this guy out. Like it's unequivocal. We have to kick him out. And so she forced me to go to the dental clinic. And I understand you were a dental technician or dental assistant.
Yeah.
And so she had me go to the dental clinic, and I remember the dentist, doctors a lot of times don't look at their patients, right? So he's looking at his chart, and he's like, so this can't be right. It says you have gold crowns from tooth number 12, 13, 14. He's listing all the numbers. Yeah. And he turns around and said, that's correct. And he was like, oh my God. So I let him know. I said, I'm here because my first sergeant says that I can't be in the Army, and they want you to opine on that. They need to know from a colonel that's a dentist whether or not I'm consistent with the military. So he wrote me a profile. And for your listeners who don't know what a profile is, it's like a doctor's note that basically says that I can stay in the Army. There's no regulation that says that I can't because of my gold teeth. But I had to carry that doctor's note around everywhere I went because someone was going to ask me about it. And so that made her more furious that I was still in the military.
So during this time, were you ever like, maybe I should just get my teeth back to normal?
Yeah, I was. but I didn't know how to do it. Because you think about it, I'm very junior in the military.
Right.
Somehow I had the money to put those gold teeth in, but I didn't have the money to fix the problem now.
Yeah.
And so I think at the time I was making maybe $800 a month as a soldier. This is a long time ago. And so I went to the dental clinic, and one of my bosses, she ended up becoming an officer later on. She said, listen, in the mental health space, you might be okay in drug and alcohol counseling, because people may be able to identify with the way that you look, but anywhere else you're going to struggle. And she said, I really recommend that you look at ways to change this. You're in the Army now, and you have free healthcare and free dental care. So that same colonel, I went back and I said, listen, I want to start the process. He developed a team, because it took a team.
All for you.
All for me, right? Wow. It took a team to be able to commit to this, and they were excited about it. It was a project that was like, we've never seen anything like this before, only in the Army, right?
Probably never again.
And so they started the process. They made sure I wasn't going to deploy anytime soon. And the first, the top teeth were fixed, and then the bottom teeth were fixed. It was a phased sort of approach. And I remember kind of going through that process. I mean, it was gruesome. The way that these gold teeth are put in, they're not like you're going to a real dentist. You're going to some ghetto shop, right? Yeah. And so what happened was the teeth were not my real teeth were not touching because there was a space between where the gold was. Typically, they shave your teeth down, but they basically just cemented gold, like a gold caps, if you will. So really my actual teeth were spaced out like this for years. So when they took the gold crown off, my jaw shifted and my teeth didn't touch. And so I had food falling out of my mouth for about a year. So I went through braces and surgery, all this other kind of stuff. And so that was transformative for me, because now the worst that people were able to see was maybe my skin color, but I wasn't looked at as some freak show at that point.
Yeah.
And so that was a big change for me. And because I failed Russian after the end of that experience of going through that dental treatment, the Army gave me an opportunity to go back and learn French. So I went to Monterey, California. I learned French. I passed. And so that was sort of the next phase of my life before I went to 3rd Special Forces Group.
Wow.
Oh, cool.
That's intense.
I think I missed that. I didn't know that. So you were assigned to a Special Forces team?
Yes. So I was Operation Detachment Alpha out of 3rd Special Forces Group, 3rd Battalion.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good for you.
So we were a group that operated in Africa, but because of the war, all of resources were shifted over to Afghanistan and Iraq. So ironically, I learned French. I get to my Special Forces unit, and 7 days later, I'm in Afghanistan.
Oh, man.
Not a lot of French spoken in Afghanistan.
Oh, no.
How long were you there?
So I did 2 tours with 3rd Special Forces Group in Afghanistan, one being about 5 months, the other being about 8 or 9 months or so. And then I left the Army to go to ROTC and become an officer.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
What year did you leave? So what years did you deploy to Afghanistan?
So I got, my first deployment was August of 2004.
Okay.
I came back in maybe January of 2005. My second deployment was just 6 months later in 2005. Yeah. That brought me back into 2006. Okay. And then in 2006, I left the military to go to ROTC.
How were your deployments? Were they?
Oh, they were
not bad.
They were like you would expect. I mean, this is early Afghanistan.
Yeah,
this is 04, 05, 05, 06. It was rough. Like as you can imagine, you might say, well, what does the French guy do if he's not speaking French? So I was, I manned the 240 Bravo. I managed the 50. I was on a 50 cal machine gun. Yep. We were always in contact. Got a Bronze Star out of that, out of those deployments, and so it was as you might imagine.
Okay. Wow.
So when you're experiencing all that stuff, and you look back at your childhood or in high school and stuff, where you're just like, whoa, like, do you amaze yourself like where you are at?
No, at that point, life is going so fast.
Okay.
Right. So, but what's happening is I'm seeing people that I admire and that I want to be like.
Yeah.
So when I was in my medic training, there was a Clyde Hill, which I love this guy. He's a nurse. He made the rank of 06 colonel, and he was the first black officer that I saw. And I remember back in the day before you were in the Army, right? We wore shiny rank, right? And so you can see the railroad tracks of that captain. And I remember seeing this black guy that I'd never seen an officer before in my life. And I said, wow, so that's possible? Like I can do that. And so that was, I'm getting these little seeds planted, that just need some water and, fertilizer to grow.
Some love.
Some love, right? Some
Yeah.
TLC.
Yeah.
And ironically, the next time I see Clyde Hill, it's in Hawaii. He's a colonel. And we're naked inside of a sauna. And I was like, I know you. So it was kind of weird in that way. Like, no, I don't know you like that, but I know you.
Yeah.
And so Clyde was, he sent me to airborne school. And so he didn't remember me as a soldier, but I remembered him. And so I've had a lot of those models that were so critical in my development.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's absolutely awesome, man. It's one of those things too, when I was I don't like to compare like my 8 years in the reserve to anything you've done.
Right.
I never deployed or anything, but we had a battalion commander. He was like 6'6" black guy.
Yeah.
I believe he was a full bird colonel. And he was just so inspirational.
Right.
So inspirational. And you could tell like he came from inner city background and whatnot. And pretty awesome guy. But I was trying to think of, there's something I wanted to.
I mean, we have a lot of stuff here. During that whole time, were you ever thinking like, you can't do it, you're not strong enough, you're not
Absolutely.
worth it?
Yeah.
Like,
Because I was told that, right? So like at every point, what I omitted is that, I would have sergeants that would say, what gang are you from? Or, that kind of thing.
Wow.
And so like kind of berating me the entire time. But like I said, I always had like these angels that were at every place that I really needed them to be. I don't want to, prophesize or anything like that. But I'll give you a good example. I had this one sergeant that was really berating me. What gang are you from? Go back to the hood, that kind of thing. And I had this guy, one of the drill sergeants, his name was Gary Berkeley. And Gary Berkeley comes up to me and he yells at me. He's like, get down. He was a black guy. He said, get down on the ground, start doing push-ups. So I'm doing push-ups. And he's whispering in my ear, don't let them take this away from you. Aww. You don't want to go back
shit,
there,
man.
And so he's talking to me, and then he gets up and he yells at me to pretend like he's. And so we had like this experience, and I'm so proud of Gary. Gary is still a friend of mine, and Gary is now finishing his. He's defending his doctoral dissertation. He just sent me a message on LinkedIn within the last week or so. He protected me, because I was on the precipice of lashing out, being kicked out, and so I needed that angel there. Yeah. And so I had all these, at every point in which I wanted to give up, I had an angel there to say, listen, do you really want to go back? And if you don't want to go back, let me help you.
Yeah.
And so I had that quite a bit in my military career.
wow.
Yeah.
It's weird how people are placed in your life right when you need them sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
It's like little miracles, I feel like.
Yeah, the last year and a half.
So crazy. Yeah.
Just the timing for anyone, the timing for, her messaging you and you responding, like it's out of this world.
I was like, guess what?
Because it's like my motivation. It's like, we'll specifically with this podcast and stuff, it's like a roller coaster. One day I'm like super about it, and other days I'm like, man, like,
and like, you get out of your funk right now, because we're not doing this like that.
Right.
I had a drill sergeant McKeithen. He was one of those guys. He was sapper, and he was Pathfinder, whatnot, and he's just that hardcore drill sergeant that I think the Army needs more of just like the guy that he set a standard, and he was a hard ass, but he was very respectful. And then we had a reservist drill sergeant Green. I never got his contact information. He was one of those, because again, I was 27. I'm with all these 18-year-old kids,
right? That had to be different.
I'm not scared, you know. I'm not people yelling at me, and I'm like, I'm not rude, but they're not getting under my skin. These drill sergeants, and they knew it. But I was always like, you know, I was one of the, you know, I think I had a 277 PT. I was in pretty good shape compared to a lot of the other guys. And here I am, the old guy. I have a lot of gray hair. That's why I keep it short. And a few weeks into basic, when we went without haircuts, I'm like this poof ball of gray head. So everyone called me old man. But I just remember this drill sergeant. He could always tell, like, because whenever we were being smoked and whatnot, and for people that don't know what that means, it's when they're making you do physical activity. They're not allowed to call it smoking anymore, I believe.
Oh, interesting. So, okay. Yeah.
It's not politically correct, but like everything else.
Yeah, I know.
But I just remember I always was like, a lot of times when I was doing sets of push-ups, and, you know, even if we had a ruck on doing push-ups in the dirt, hands hurt, and, you know, I'm smiling. And I'm giving motivation to the guys next to me, because they're just dying and miserable. I'm like, oh, you're only getting stronger. You're only getting stronger. And and they saw that. And I think they almost kind of respected that, because, you know, and especially if you're downrange, you need that.
Right.
Well, actually, that kind of goes to like one of the things I wanted to ask you. Like, we all have like our own like inner voice and stuff. Like, when you're going through something hard, are you like, come on, you know, you can do this, or like, you know, don't be a little, you know, like, we got this, like talking to yourself? Or are you like, how do you talk to yourself when you're going through hard times or stressful times?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So, ironically, what kept me going, and I don't know where this even came from, but I wasn't a Christian. I wasn't, you know, really raised in a church growing up, but somehow I started reading Psalms 23 in the Bible.
Okay.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Yeah. And I told myself, I've already been through that valley.
Yeah.
I walked through that valley at 17, you know? And so the thought is that if I can walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I can walk anywhere. And so that's something that really stuck with me. Not really sure how I landed on that, but that's what I started reading quite a bit in basic training and boot camp. And that's what I read quite a bit while deployed to Afghanistan, knowing that that I was in that valley again.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, you can get through anything. Look what you went through. There's no way you can't go through anything else that life throws you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're fortunate, and you're not fortunate specifically in like you losing your friend, obviously, but you're fortunate that you went through that at that age, I believe, because I went through my valley, or arguably still going through it. You know, I'm 37. You know, so I started, you know, last year just because I've been through adversity. You know, I lost my sister to you know, drugs and heroin and whatnot, and you name it. And, you know, she passed away 4 years ago. God rest her soul. I brought her picture with us because, you know, but, you know, last year, you know, we thought, or I thought I knew what adversity was. I thought I knew what hardship was, and I had no idea on, and a lot of this stuff I will have to cut out, but I just wanted you to be aware, because I think it's so important to know where somebody's coming from. And like, why is somebody doing this crazy podcast? Because this is not me. This really isn't. I mean, it is now. It wasn't me.
Well, normally, like, we'll talk about hard times together, but we don't air it all, you know. But we have noticed, you know, the more you talk about your story, there's so many people out there that can relate, that need your voice, and they want to hear you, but they also want to talk to you, and they want to be heard. Even if you're just sitting there listening to them, it means so much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, you know, and that just give you a, like, you know, idea of, you know, adversity, what we've been through. It's very different, you know. It's like, but it's you know, everybody's pain is their own. And we all know that, you know, and you can't compare pain in the grand scheme of things, but
well, I have a hard past too. I was in an abusive relationship for like 7 years, like really bad, and back and forth from New York and Kentucky. And long story short, I had my two daughters. They were like 3 and 4 years old, or 2 and 3. And I just had, so all of my stuff from like when I was born up to, you know, 2009, like my baby pictures, my kids, you know, all their clothes and toys and stuff like that, everything, furniture, everything. So it's like my house burnt down and everything was in it, because when I ran for my life, like I like left that situation, and I had 2 grocery bags full of clothes, and that was all I had.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And like I haven't really talked about that on the podcast because it's just like I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
And I don't want, I work at a school, elementary school,
Right.
and I don't want people to like, I think, judge me, or I don't want to get fired for like whatever stuff happened, because there was like, drugs and violence and crazy stuff. It's like my Hollywood. It's like a movie to me.
Right.
But that chunk of my life, I, went through my valley and came out, and literally like a light switch just went off in my brain, because people are like, everyone's always like, why didn't you leave earlier? And I don't ever ask anyone that question, ever. It's not like that. But something literally did just click, and I was like, what am I doing? I have these two beautiful kids that are like just angels. So I feel like they saved me. And that's crazy. It gives me chills when I say that. But I feel like all of that stuff that I went through for such a long time, I'm so different with the situation that's going on now, because I'm like, it'll be okay, and just stay positive. I'm like his rock. I'm his positive jolt of energy and stuff. And where I'll be so annoyingly positive, he'll be annoyed by me. And it's like
no matter how bad things have gotten, no matter how bad, everything's gonna be all right.
Right.
And like
our wives are like that for us.
Right.
My wife is the same way.
I love it so much. I love it.
I really believe she was meant to go through that stuff, that she made it through, because if I don't know where I'd be today if it weren't for her. Like the amount of support she provides me, and I think on the outside looking in, she seems like an awesome person. Like she's perfect. Like I have there's nothing I would change about her. I checked myself into the VA. I went into a walk-in mental health clinic, and I wasn't suicidal. I was very concerned about how I was feeling in my head, and I wasn't doing well. And she said to me, she's like, listen, I'm so worried about other people right now, but right now I'm more worried about you. Like, I was very emotional and just, and just not doing good. I was still going to work and stuff like that. But, so I go into this mental health clinic, and, I go in there and I check in, and there's this girl sitting at the desk, and, like I must have not looked good, like I probably look like I may have been crying. And, I walk into this girl, and she like hands me a piece of paper, and I fill out here, like I'm at the DMV, and I'm like, all right. And like, I'm a pretty respectful guy, so I didn't say anything. Then I thought about it. I'm like, maybe I should say something, because what if the next guy that comes in here, like I did today? So I fill out the paperwork, and like I'm filling this out, and like I'm literally like, I got tears dripping. I've those in the Army, how you fill out those questionnaires like on a 0 to 4, or how and like you're like 0 0 0 0.
Right.
How many times we filled this out? Well, this is the first time I read it, and it meant something to me, and I'm realizing I'm selecting 4, which is like. I'm serious. Other than like threat to hurt yourself or others, 0. Like I have no interest, but so I fill this out, and I'm emotional filling it out, and I walk up to that lady and I hand it to her, and she goes to take it from me. Listen, I'm like, can you do me a favor? When the next person comes in here like I did here today, can you at least pretend you fucking care at least a little? And I said it like that.
Right.
Didn't have to be like that, but there's 2 other women sitting behind her, and she like they both turn around like, and I think I apologized to her. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm just. Having a bad day.
Yeah.
And but hopefully I made an impact on her. I mean, if somebody said that to me like I did, it would have made an impact on me, and I hope to God I did. But so the cool part was, though, I sit down, and there's this police officer that comes around the corner. He sits next to me. He's like, "Hey, are you good?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
Wow.
He's like, I just want to let you know I heard you. And I'm like, "No, I'm sorry." He's like, "No, thank you."
Right.
And he's like, yeah, he's like, if you want to talk, I'm here to listen until you like call you in or whatever. And that guy sat there, and he listened to me, and like you can tell when somebody's listening, and more importantly, you can tell when somebody cares.
Yeah.
And this guy, he not only I just spilled it all out, everything I have going on. Just I'm talking to him, and he's a multiple combat vet in Afghanistan as well and stuff, and he's been through a lot, and it was a great conversation with him. And I go in there, I talk to a psychiatrist for the first time in my entire life. They got me in very quick, which must have meant I must have looked like that bad.
Yeah.
But it was cool because I had a professional. I was so worried because my perception of like pharmaceuticals and antidepressants stuff, I feel like they just overprescribe. They may not. That's just my opinion. But I go in there, and this psychiatrist who I thought was going to try to just shove pills down my throat, he didn't. He asked me questions that I was so impressed. This guy was like Xavier, like from the X-Men. He was just like he was so impressive, and he's very good at his job. And he talked to me for it was about an hour, just asking me questions. And the part I liked the most, he didn't act like he felt bad for me, and I didn't want him to, because she feels bad for me every day, and my kids at that point would worry about me. So And this guy told me after I told him what I got going on, he asked me a question like, listen, he's like, I will pretty much, if you needed it, prescribe you anything you need. He's like, but you seem like you have a great handle on things. He's like, you're doing good. You got all the measures put in place. You're taking care of yourself. And I was.
Right.
He's like, he's like, what you're going through is very real. And he's like, I feel like, just got to stay the course. And he prescribed me a just in case medicine, which I still have never touched. Cause I'm, and if I had to, I would, but I'm doing better now than I've ever done my entire life.
That's amazing.
And the thing is, and if I only listened to my therapist at the VA, like 6 months before this, when things just started to get bad, I remember she drew on a piece of paper. She's like, all right, she put it in a circle, like things you can control. And then she's like, things you can't control are outside the circle. And I remember her saying that to me, and I didn't listen to her. I'm like, yeah. And then all of a sudden it just clicked that day at the VA. I was like, I'm going to invest in things I can control. And I'm going to try to do my best at not dwelling on these things that I can't control.
That almost sounds like the Serenity Prayer.
Dude, 100%. Yeah. And, so I started working out more, started eating better. I used AI to look up the best natural supplements you could take for mental health and stuff, like ginkgo biloba and, different various things like that. And, and then one of the things I stumbled upon was called that Trip VR meditation I was telling you about earlier. Right. And like, that has been, guided meditation, because I was listening to a podcast, Eddie Pierno, Your World Within podcast, still listen to it pretty regularly. He talked about...
On the way here we did, actually.
Yeah, we did. Guided meditation he mentioned. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try it. Right. Because he just the way he talked about it, he's so enthusiastic. I'm like, I got to try it. So I try it because I had an Oculus, and I'm like, this is pretty cool. And I use it a little bit more often. And I'm like, this is incredible. I really feel like it was helping. There were some nights I was broken, just so stressed. And I would use that. By the time I was done, I'm like, it was like a light switch. I was completely fine, and it was really cool. So, and then obviously I told you how I wrote a review, and she was my first, I'm going to say bigger guest. Nenea Reeves was on my podcast, episode 15. But, on top of that, though, I start running more, starting to get more consistent, physically, and just then I realized I'm like, we're doing good, and then we're happy, and then decided to start this podcast in November, just on a whim. I'm like, why not?
Right.
And it's
the first one was really weird.
Yeah.
it was fun. It was so fun, but just
episode 1
weird. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, believe it or not, in episode 1, I discussed how when we first started dating, because I had a good friend of mine ask me, he's like, is your relationship really as good as you make it seem like on social media? Or do you guys really freaking hate each other and just put on, and I'm like, no, it really is that good.
It really is.
At least I think it is. Well, she lies to me. But, so yeah, we,
you're going to probably talk about the story.
Oh yeah. In the first episode, because our relationship started off pretty rocky. Like I after a month of us starting to date, I kind of got wondering how my ex-girlfriend was doing. And
he was in a position in his mind, I think, where he didn't know if he was ready to get over her yet.
Yeah, and I was very honest with her about it. But but we discussed that.
Then he was bad and hung out with her.
And
it was really weird, because normally where I was at, because I've dealt with the crappy boyfriend thing all the time, I was like, all right, if I'm not happy with you, bye. If you do one little thing, bye.
Right.
But it was different. And I felt it in my veins that everything was different. So then what really happened, which it kind of should have been the opposite, I was like crying and talking to him and stuff. I'm like, we need to make this work, instead of him saying, we need to make this work.
Yeah.
It was very weird.
Yeah.
But we sat for a while. I went to Turning Stone, and we talked in the car for a really long time. And I think after that, it was like that night or something, right? And I think he came to my house. He talked to me. He talked to my mom just to be respectful.
I had to go to her. I had to go to her house at night. And keep in mind, I was going there kind of on a regular basis, and her mom knew what happened.
Yeah.
I told her.
Well, I walk into the house, quiet. I'm about to walk downstairs, and her mom's sitting in the dark in the living room. It's like, oh, you want to sit down for a minute? I'm like, I've never been more scared in my life. Like drill sergeants.
You just saw a silhouette.
But I will forever thank her so much, because she
Did
said
she have anything in her hands?
I know.
No,
cutting an apple or something,
just a baseball bat. I'll never forget, because I was so worried what she was gonna have to say, and she's just like, listen, she's like, just remember, it's not just my daughter down there. She's got 2 little girls too. And I'm like, I understand. And, you know, and I obviously apologize for whatever happened. And
that was the main thing we wanted to focus on with that episode was the power of forgiveness.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't always have to, you know, forgive people if they do that, whatever kind of stuff. But
I've always heard once a cheater, always a cheater. So like, okay, human beings make mistakes, and I'm not saying she should have forgave me. I'm saying she did forgive me, and we've had an incredible 8 years that I wouldn't change for the world. Yeah. We have such a good, healthy relationship. And people need to know that. And I'm not saying if somebody cheats, you should forgive them either, though.
Right.
It's kind of
it's up to you and the relationship and
situation.
what
There
you
is no
want to
answer.
do.
Right.
There is no answer.
But I know we got way off on a tangent from talking about you and your story, but I just wanted to interject and just, you know, because, you know, I really wanted you to, you know, just know adversity and, you know, has many faces. And
It absolutely does.
So we were talking about, I want you to get into when you were like, I want to go, did you go to school to like be you know, a doctor or
PA, right?
So PA. So I went to school. So you probably know this more than anyone. Soldiers really don't have the opportunity to go to school.
Okay.
Like they just can't pause and go to school. And that was my dilemma. So I went to school in strange places. You know, I completed English Composition 2 on a mountaintop bordering Afghanistan and Pakistan. So I would hike the mountain.
So your downtime, you would study and do stuff? Wow. Okay.
Right.
Man.
So we would go through training evolutions, and when I'm done with training, I would study and I would take classes. But that wasn't sustainable. That you can't finish a degree that way, which is the reason why I ended up getting out. I did about 2 years worth of college credits on mountaintops and in strange places around the world, and then I finally decided to get out, and that's what I did in 2006.
Oh wow.
Cool.
Yeah.
So how many years were you in total then?
21.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it would have been 21 years total active duty. It felt like 23 because RLTC is still RLTC. And so, you know, 2 years of RLTC, 21 years active duty.
Okay.
About half officer, half enlisted.
Yeah. That's pretty incredible. So and then how did the White House come into play? Like how did that did that fall into your lap randomly, did it seem? Or
It's so funny. Like on the way here, I'm like, were you just like, oh, I'll just fill out my resume and throw it to the White House?
In
like,
Indeed or Monster?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Like, what was the process from when you wanting to even go for it?
Yeah, so when I was in school, there was a guy who served at the White House, Stuart Miller, and you know, these seeds that people plant in your life, right? You learn from them. And bottom line is I was in the field in South Korea. I was practicing medicine out there. I was taking care of my soldiers. And I got a notification that the White House was looking for applicants. You needed to turn that application around in 48 hours.
Oh, wow.
And it was everything from everything you would need for a top secret security clearance. I mean, it's not just I need to fill it out. I need to go back and find out where you lived and where you worked and, you know, all of my. And so trying to get all of that information in that 48 hours was daunting. But but I got it in, you know, and so I flew out from South Korea to Washington, D.C. to interview. It was magical for me. So I really encourage you guys to go down to D.C. tomorrow.
Yes.
Because I was able to, the George Washington Monument and Thomas Jefferson, all these things that you only see in the movies. I was, you know, I'm a kid from Atlanta, Georgia. I had never been to Washington, D.C. before that point. And so I was just amazed, like, wow. And then actually going to the White House to actually interview, and it was the first time I saw it. It was just astounding. And so I went through a series of interviews over a number of days, from personality to, you know, to security and all sorts of things like that. And so cool. As I'm headed back to South Korea, they said, we selected you and pack up your things. And so I got back to South Korea. I let my unit know, and you know, the White House doesn't take no for an answer. So basically they had to figure it out. And I was out of there. And so it was all very short order. Like I should have been in Korea for at least a year. And that was truncated for me to go to the White House.
So by the time you made it this far, because this is years into your military career and stuff, and like were you 100% confident when you went to the White House, or did you
Oh,
still?
God, no.
Okay. I love
No,
it.
no.
You're
Good.
like, me,
No, no,
I'm
no.
going in there.
Good.
What
No.
is happening?
No, not at all. You know, I have to do these things like we probably all have to do. I remember watching this Oprah Winfrey interview. I think it was 2020 or something like that. She was being interviewed, and they were so unsure about her being successful. They were like, "You're gonna start this show. It's gonna go national. What happens if it doesn't do well?" And she was like, "I'll be fine. If
yeah.
if it doesn't do well, I'll still be fine." You know, and so
That's a good
that's
way
what
to-
that's what I listened to that, and I was confident in the fact that no matter who they chose or if they chose me or not, that I would still be fine, because at that point I had already gone through so much.
Right.
And my plans were just to go retire in Hawaii. This was really just an opportunity to look at. But if I didn't make it to the White House, I would have been on the beach somewhere.
Yeah.
Living my best life.
Yeah.
And so that was really the idea. I kind of came in with the idea that I'll be fine. I'll be.
I think
just
it's a way to do it.
Yeah.
You know, just like don't expect anything.
Yeah.
That way you won't be let down or anything. Just go for it. And if it doesn't happen,
Well, and then you get to see all the people who are interviewing. And you're like, I'm not that. I'm
Yeah.
not that. I'm not that. I'm not. I'm like, all these people are better than I am, right? And so that was
but they're really not. They're just different.
Sounds like me
so it's
every
like
day.
right. They're not better than you. It's just.
But that's what I
everyone's
told
different.
myself.
Right,
I was like,
right.
there is no way that I compare to to some of these people who are
Yeah.
interviewing, because
Right.
you kind of you get an opportunity to talk to each other before you kind of go in before the panel and all the stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, I don't have any of those credentials. I haven't done those things, So
Yeah.
I'm already thinking that that there's no way I'm going to make it here.
Yeah.
You know what's kind of cool though, if you really think about it, if you're like, I don't have all the credentials or whatever, like him and no college and stuff and what he's doing now, like you is probably what they love the most out of everyone else, like your personality, like who you are. And that I think says more than anything that you could have learned out of a book, you know?
Yeah. And I think, there's elements of what they look for. I mean, when you've made it to that point, you've already, I think like most jobs, you've already met the requirements. You have the academic pedigree, you have the experience, you have the deployments, you have all the things. Now it's just, can we trust you? Suitability. Can we trust you to be within arm's reach of the president? Can we trust you to be able to do this job no matter the things that you have to do? Like, during COVID, I remember, doing everything to make sure that the president or vice president was never going to be exposed to any disease. If that meant me, pulling out Sandy wipes and wiping the toilet one more time,
Yeah.
just to make sure that happened,
Yeah.
those types of things can never be beneath you. You have to
Right.
be, humble enough to say there's no job that's too low for me.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the things that they really look for. They look for people who are not gonna, say, I'm too good for this, or look
Yeah.
at who I am.
Funny you say that.
Yeah.
And so there's a way to be able to sort of discern that,
Yeah.
and to make sure that you can, you're picking the right people for the team. And I think we did a really good job at doing that. No one was above anything on my
Yeah.
team.
I've always said that. Every employer I've ever worked for, because you always hear people, that's not in my job description.
Yeah.
And I've always had the mentality like I'm not too good to clean a toilet.
Right.
Right.
And I think if everyone had that mindset, this world would be a much better place.
Different.
But
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the future, like, what do you want to do? Even like, 5 years from now or like 20 years from now, like, where do you want to end up?
Yeah, so I feel like the road to my development is always under construction,
Yeah.
right? And so now I'm a diplomat. I'm a foreign service medical provider for a Department of State, which is what I've always wanted to transition to.
can you elaborate on what that is? Because I'm going to be honest with you, sounds impressive to me. I have no idea what any of that means.
I know it's going to be the same thing with with IT, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, I take care of diplomats and their families overseas at embassies, and so I'm headed to my first embassy in September.
Okay.
And what we do is every embassy has a medical provider that takes care of the diplomats, their families, and advanced diplomacy by building connections with the local health system. Cool. And so for 2 decades, my modus operandi was always in the defense sector. Now I'm in a diplomatic sector. So
Okay.
diplomacy is what I do. Cool. And so what that means is that for the next, God willing, the next 15, 17 years or so, I'll move around the world. I'll take care of those that are advancing diplomacy, that soft power, advancing the interests of the United States in that way, and ensuring that they're healthy enough to be able to do that. And so in that, my goal is to expose my kids to as much as possible. My wife is South Korean, so my kids are mixed race. They're bilingual. They speak Korean and English. Awesome. And so what we hope to do is, we're going to a Russian-speaking country.
Just another thing.
And so, back to Russian all over again, right where I started. And so the goal is to have my kids become global citizens and not to live in that divided world where you had the one black kid. I think I had one white kid in my school. But, in their lives, they don't see people in that way. They see people as people, not divided by their ethnicity, their color, their race, their creed, their religion, their language. None of those things are barriers because the environments that we've always put them in, they're in a multi-ethnic community. They're in a community where people speak different languages. And so I really want to cement that. Because I think that's what leadership requires, and I envision that my children are going to be global leaders.
That's amazing.
That's incredible.
They will. They'll be awesome.
And there's a lot of power in that confidence. I said to my kid, beginning of the school year, I'm like, listen, I don't want to ask you about your homework anymore. You're 15. You're going into high school. I'm like, just don't lie to me anymore. If you didn't do your homework, just tell me. And I don't want to check up on you. Just show me what you can do. I'm like, I'm putting a lot of effort into, making my life better right now. You should try it out. And I had a really good talk with him. And like I have so many other good talks. I thought it went in one ear and out the other. And it was pretty cool because he gets his first report card and he normally a 60 student and he got just about a 90. And I'm like, so proud of my kid.
You
so
see it glow in his face. It's just like, and you just feel so happy and proud.
Having a parent that believes in you and you clearly believe in your kids. That's incredible. I love hearing that, man. That's great.
How, does your wife like to travel and stuff?
So we met in South Korea. So, we met in South Korea in a coffee shop of all places.
Cool.
And I'm sitting there. My nurses were native Korean, so they didn't speak English very well.
Okay.
And they would tell me things like, in the Korean language, they don't use pronouns the way we use pronouns, like he, her. So they would say, he's in exam room number 1. He has pelvic pain. He has, and in my mind, I'm preparing to go see a male patient. I walk in, it's a female patient. And so I said, I can't make them learn English to the way that I need them to learn English. Let me try to learn Korean. And so I'm in the coffee shop trying to speak Korean. She's laughing at me because I'm butchering this language. It is grotesque. I said, don't laugh at me, help me.
Yeah.
But she couldn't speak English either. And so,
funny.
So we communicated via application, translators, and then we started going to church. And her church was a mega church, and they had Bluetooth English translation. So
cool.
It was simultaneous translation. So I was able to attend church services with her. And she was able to still, attend church as well in her native language. And so we moved to Hawaii. And she was like, "Oh my God, this is America." I said, "No, this isn't. This is this is a state, but this is not Oklahoma. This is not where I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. This is this is a paradise, and this is going to change." And so we get to Washington D.C. After bouncing between South Korea and Hawaii for a little while. And that's kind of all she wrote. So yes, to answer your question, my wife really loves to travel.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Everywhere we've gone, we use that country as a jumping off point. So from Korea, we went to Japan and Australia, and, things like that. And so we'll do the same thing as we move forward is to be able to use those countries as a center focal point and then just go to other areas. So we have those plans.
That's so cool.
No, that's neat.
So lucky, with all of your hard work and stuff, you and your family can all do that.
Yeah.
And so many people can't travel.
Yeah.
And I want to travel. Someday we'll be able to travel.
I just want to, kind of trail on you mentioned in church. I know I mentioned this to you off the podcast, but, we've been going to church since December, and I think I feel horrible for not mentioning it because I was mentioning all these things that we did to invest in ourselves or invest in myself. And that's been one of the most pivotal things as well, just the positive energy and, being able to cast your worry and your anxiety into faith. There's so much power in that. And, and I don't care, people are atheists and whatnot, I don't try to push religion on anyone, but I will tell you what worked for me, and I'll tell you what worked for my family. And when my 10-year-old goes to church for the first time with us, it was our, my first time there, and since I was probably 15 or so, they're doing worship, they do music, non-denominational, and my son like reaches up to me in the middle of it, he like taps my arm, like I lean down, he's like, "Dad, can we come here every week?" I'm like,
"Yep, we can."
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's
so cute.
It is definitely a center focal point for us because God, faith is it. There in all of my life, definitely after I met my wife, I still struggled with, is this possible? Can I do this? And my wife would always say, pray about it, and so we pray quite a bit. One of the strangest things that happened to us, and it was a testament to how powerful prayer really is Kim Jong-un, when he was shooting intercontinental ballistic missiles all over the place. We were in Hawaii, and I don't know if you know this, but we got a scare in Hawaii that basically there was an intercontinental ballistic missile message that came across all phones for people who lived in Hawaii saying that there's an intercontinental ballistic missile inbound. This is not a drill. Take cover. So I remember seeing that on my phone. It was one of those alerts, like almost like a tornado alert that will pop up on your phone. And so I look at him like, is this a joke? Like, what is this? And I go to my wife and I say, honey, what is your phone? Did you get this alert? And she looked at it. And we knew about that time, how much time we had before that missile hit the island. And for minutes, several minutes, there was no retraction. There was no correction. I looked outside and it was the same sunny skies and rainbows that I always saw. And I remember thinking, this is it. We're going to die. And I remember talking to my wife and we just prayed. And I was so at peace.
Man.
Knowing that we are, and meanwhile, people were putting their children into under manhole covers on the streets, and everyone's panicking. But there's really nothing that you can do. If there was truly ICBM that was going to strike that island, everyone was going to die. Or at least the majority of people, right? And so, the confidence that my wife had to say, "Let's pray," in that moment.
Oh man.
Yeah, it like gives you goosebumps.
Yeah.
That's so crazy.
And we were ready. And so I think that was powerful.
Yeah.
20 minutes or so later, it turns out that whoever sent that message to all
Wrong button.
all people on the island at that time, it was a wrong button. They had this thing it sounds like they had it teed up just in case, like they wanted to have this ready to go, so they can hurry up and push this message because of the constant threat.
Yeah, right.
And so, but the point is that when you're ready to go, and at that time I was in my mid 30s, I was confident, and a lot of that strength comes from my wife.
Yeah, I can relate there, man. Like 90% of my strength comes from her.
I've been into God since I was younger.
Oh, okay.
When I was actually in Kentucky, I would go to church every Wednesday and Sunday and bring my little girls when they were born. And then came home to New York after all that stuff. And then I haven't gone to church since the whole time. And then we started going. And I think, well, for me, when you get so connected in the past, since we've been going to church and stuff, I've always been connected, but just even more and more open to, Mother Nature and like energy and like just a positive life. I get more okay with death. And we think about death and talk about death all the time. And I think it was in episode 12, Alessandra.
Oh, yeah.
So one of my best friends was actually hit by a truck a month and a half ago.
Well, Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, end of May. And she didn't make it. Her husband was with her and he witnessed everything. The dog died with her. He had another dog and stuff. And that day and the second day, talking to my friends and stuff about it, I was like a mess. But then after that, he's been way more emotional than me. And I the only thing I can do is like how to explain it is I'm just so okay with life and I trust God and I am okay with where I feel like she is right now. And it's just weird because normally I'm like a hot mess. I'm like bawling and crying for days, weeks when stuff like that happens.
Right.
And I can't get over it until it's been a really long time.
Right.
And just, I think
And her story.
Oh, yeah.
Her story, because she was our episode 12. She was one of our, I say she was like our first cheerleader.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah.
She was like one of the people that since we started doing this.
So she was on one of your episodes
Yeah.
and she died.
Last winter she was on. Yeah.
This past winter.
Yeah, this past winter.
February.
Yeah.
She came to our house and spent the night. And so we got married, what, 4 years ago? 3 years ago?
You better get this right.
Yeah, wow.
You better get this right.
Here's the thing. We
This is
I'll be
being
driving
recorded.
home without you.
we celebrate. We got married on our day we started dating. I said we're not starting over. Like
Right.
the day I met you is the most important day of my life.
Right.
Not, granted, the wedding was great, but the only time I met Alessandra was at our wedding. I've heard about her, for years, and great person. Met her husband, great guy, and then she came to spend the night with us, and it was in February, as we already discussed, was a hard month for me. That same month, my freaking dog died, randomly. She's on the cover of my podcast. But in listening to her story, and that's why I think there's so much value in sitting here and talking to Bernard Toney Jr. Like, what is more powerful than somebody's testimony?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
What is more powerful than that? And if they could do it, if you could do what, if you could overcome what you've been through, and then you went from that to working at the White House, if I can overcome what I went through in this last year and a half and then start a podcast, even if it falls on its face, I don't think it will. Like in hearing Alessandra's story, and it stinks because it was right before we got good audio. So it was the quality. I'm like, I just wish it was perfect because, but it is what it is. But she told her story for, she did 2 parts. I think we did like 3 hours, and it was so powerful. And she's been through hell. She talked about her innocence being taken away when she was very young to anorexia and severe mental health. And she talked about going to a psych ward when she was, I think, 17. And then she went from that to being a very successful. She was a licensed dietitian, and she was involved in clinical trials and whatnot for cancer treatment. And she had a beautiful beautiful son, and just perfect
Miracle baby. She wasn't supposed to have him. Yes.
And her husband, just such a great guy. And, throw this in there, we went to visit them, a week after she passed away, and went to their house and to see her husband. And again, the last time I saw him was on our weddings, because he didn't, when she came up and we did the podcast, he canceled right at the last second, something came up. So she came by herself. And, when we went there, though, the week after she passed away, and I saw how strong he was, and I saw how strong his son was, I was just like, I got no excuse, And I still have bad days, and yes, my struggles are very real, but in comparison, she's my world, I now hug her more. I love her more. I appreciate her more, as I have been, in this last year and a half has taught me, like, life can change so quick.
Yeah.
Everything can go away, snap of a finger.
It can. But the thing that I'm reminded of is that, God, we're living testimonies.
Yeah.
Right? And so that is, but we had to go through it.
Yes.
I mean, we look at a diamond, the amount of pressure and heat required to make something so precious.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to go through the fire, and I think that's what people need to see, because when I came out on social media, which I wasn't a prolific user of social media, but when I made this post of a juxtaposition of me with gold teeth and then me as an officer in the Army side by side, that post had over 3 million impressions, over 90,000 people engaged on it some kind of way. Wow. But what was profound was not those vanity metrics. What was profound was people in my inbox saying, "Thank you for letting me see people differently." The kid with the gold teeth, I would have never looked at him.
Oh.
Yeah.
The guy that grew up whatever way, I would have never considered this person as a candidate. Or people who on the other side of it said, thank you for showing who you are, because I'm that.
Yeah.
When we can start creating the conditions so that we see each other differently, we see each other for who we are, not, our physical appearance.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I'm here. I know that my children are gonna have challenges in life. They're gonna have issues with who they are, and they might struggle with that. But I'm here to help people kind of push through that, because for the longest time, geez, you have no idea. I mean, I would even say that I'm still like, I don't belong here. But I'm just reminded that God says, no, I'm in control.
Yeah, exactly.
I got the wheel. You stay in the passenger seat.
Yeah.
Your steps are ordered by me. And so that's really what I truly believe in. As long as I continue to kind of put that out there, I think people are more receptive.
Absolutely.
And they can see that although we have you have your own challenges, you do too. But as we create these conditions so that people can see vulnerability and they can see resilience and perseverance, that's what matters the most.
Yeah.
And I've found so much strength in, even just relationships with people I don't even know, just by being vulnerable with people.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? And it's unbelievable.
Right.
It's life changing. And when you listen to people, because speaking of, you work at embassies. I had an Afghan refugee that left Afghanistan and during the troop withdrawal in 21. And he told me what he went through. He told me what he went through because he worked for the embassy as a network engineer. And I remember last year I was having it was a very hard point in time of my year. And I remember it was just him and I interviewed him with my boss at the time. And I really pushed for him. I really liked him. His English is, it needs work.
Right.
But in the grand scheme of things, I could just, something about him just radiated to me. Right. And I remember I was alone with him and I'm like, hey, how do you like America? And he's like, he's like, over there, I very rich. Over here, no. He's like, no, but he says, he's like, no, and because I think I laughed too. And he's like, no. And he's like, not American rich. He's like the real rich. He's like, my friends and family are all there.
Okay.
He's like, here I have nothing. He's like, I barely speak English. My wife barely speaks English. And he's like, we have nothing. And it was, and I just. And then he showed me pictures and he told me what he went through when he went to Fort McCoy afterwards for like a refugee staging area, and like just horrible what he went through. Right. And it's unbelievable. And like I'm like, this guy fled for his life.
Yeah.
And then got left behind and then finally got out, and it was so powerful. And it was one of those things, like in that moment, in that point in time of my life, like I needed to hear that so bad. Like it changed my life. And I told him that, and I'm like, man, you should be on a podcast sometime.
Right.
I don't know if he can or can't, being that, he left there. But there's so much powerful in that. And
trying to help people like him have, not just friends, but get out of his box, I guess. So we have a boat and he asked him to go on the boat, and they're not around water ever.
Wait, I got to tell him the story because it's hilarious real quick. Sorry.
Right. He's a good storyteller. He'll tell it.
So it was coming up on the weekend, and like last year we got a boat, and like it was a horrible time to get a boat. Like borderline couldn't afford it, but we did. And then it ended up being like the most beautiful, fun, hardest summer of my life. Cause I was, we live right next to a lake, and so one weekend, it was a really nice weekend, and he just started there, and it was right after we had that conversation. So I feel bad for the guy, and I'm like, hey, we're going to be out on our boat this weekend if you want to go. And he's a boat? And he's like, oh, I don't know how to swim. I'm like, you don't know how to swim. I got life jackets. He's all right. And he's got little kids and stuff. And he's like, oh, maybe. And then, so what day are you going out? I'm like, oh, Sunday. So I think, and then we woke up on Saturday morning at 8 a.m. He's like, and he's calling my phone. I'm still in bed. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? He's like, hey, my family, we're at where we live. And I'm like, oh, crap. He's like, yeah, we're here waiting. I'm like, well, like, we weren't even, but we had to load the boat. I'm like, I'm like, crap. But he was so excited.
Right.
I'm like, we got to go now. So I'm like, give me 45 minutes. We'll be down there. And it was cool because we picked him up, and it was so, I'll never forget it. Like his family, he seemed to be okay, but his kids, and he had a 17-year-old nephew. Again, they've never been around water their whole lives, So they're stepping on the boat and they look terrified. And his kids were, I think like 6'3" and like a 6-month-old, and
their nephew or something.
And their 17-year-old nephew.
Yeah.
And it was him and his wife. So I had his whole family on our boat, and like they looked like they were in Disney World. And it made me feel.
I'm trying to imagine what that might be like if I've never been around water. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and it was cool, and then it's because so that was middle of last year. Then I ended up leaving that place of employment, and I still stayed in contact with him. And he said something to me. He's like, I'll never forget my trip.
His boat adventure or something
he's
like
I'll
that.
never forget the boat
Little
adventure
lake.
at
Yeah.
me, you know, where we live.
So
And,
cute.
yeah, it was just, it made me feel so good, man. And, you know,
Yeah.
just that little,
Just trying to give back,
Yeah.
I guess. It's so simple,
Yeah.
and it just, brought them joy and brought us joy. So
Yeah.
it cost us nothing.
Nothing.
yeah.
It's just, I don't know. And if everyone did that, this world would be such a great place. Just love people. And like, that's what General Lucky, we had General
Yeah.
Lucky on last Friday.
Yeah.
And his message was really like, like you and I could have completely different opinions from each other. That doesn't mean we have to hate each other.
Right. Yep.
Like you could support something, I could support something completely different. I don't care how controversial it is. Like, why does that mean we have to hate each other and dislike each other?
Right.
And it's like it's
Lead with love.
should-
Not be so hateful and
Things
stuff all the time.
it shouldn't be siloed down to blue and red
Right.
by any means.
Right.
Nothing should be.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I try to stay out of politics in general, but just like
Or even more widely, like when I think about before I even went to PA school, you have to do these shadowing hours, and you have to train, prove that you have the acumen to be able to do certain things even before you apply. Well, I applied for school in Afghanistan, and my patients were enemy combatants. So these were people who were, shot but not killed.
Right.
And so to look that person, that soldier in the eyes that otherwise would have wanted to kill you, right?
Yeah.
And you're providing care for them and taking care of them. I hope that changes hearts.
I was going to say, like, them looking at you helping them,
Right.
them knowing that
Right.
you guys are enemies.
Right.
Maybe that's got to do something.
It's got to do something.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I never really thought about that before.
Yeah. Well, that's our that's our professional military, our professional army, and so even in the worst of situations, we take care of people. And so I hope that those types of experiences, and who knows what that soldier goes and tells, the people in his village or other people. I hope that it changes hearts.
Yeah, and I think that's, they say the ripple effect, the positive ripple effect you can create in the entire world just by doing something small or something big. And man, I can't imagine the ripples you've created.
No kidding.
Like it's
Waves.
It's out of this world. Yeah. No, and I know
for
you're
real.
a super humble guy, but like,
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine how positive even just your story has impacted people's lives.
How many kids that are right now in a position where you were when you were younger, and if they can hear your story, what they can get a little oomph of positive energy, like, okay, if he can do it, I can do it. And because they might not hear that they can do it.
You're right. And so I've tried to, to enter into that space, and I have. I've given talks at juvenile detention centers and things like that with court-involved youth. I think it was last year, I believe it was last year, that they paired me with this guy who was in jail for like 24 years to go and give talks to court-involved youth. And this guy is now a credible messenger in Washington, D.C. He had his sentence commuted by Barack Obama, President Obama. And so they paired us together as a person who took a different path and has come out of a bad situation. But to see those kids, some of them were going to jail for a very long time, even after. So they were just in a juvenile detention center until they were of age to go to a federal facility. But some of them were not yet, and it was like an early warning. And so I have engaged in that space trying to make sure that people see something different. Because you've grown up in certain environments. We talked about having that 15-mile radius that I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I had no idea what California was, or Texas, or New York. And so it was just something on a map that we had to remember the names of the states. But those kids probably haven't seen a person like me. I'm from those areas, but they probably haven't seen many examples of someone who's gotten out of that.
Yeah.
So
Watch, someday someone's going to call you and be like, because of you, I'm doing this. Or have you ever gotten a message from someone that said, I heard your story and I'm at this position in my life right now where I could have went this way?
Not quite in that context, but I can tell you where the tables have turned. And so the first college class that I've ever taken in my life, I failed. And when I failed, I mean, I really failed. It was like, what is happening? And so my sergeant made me take the class. He said, you are going to go to college. whether you like it or not. You're my soldier, and you're going to go. And if you don't go to college, then I'll find some things for you to do. Trust me. And so so I took the college class. I failed. I said, see, I told you I couldn't do this. He made me take another college class. He was leaving the military at that time. His name is Jason Durr. He was leaving the military. And that second class that I took, I passed. And I was so excited about it. But at that point, he had already exited the military to go to get his degree in social work. I was the executive officer about 8 years later. This would have been about 8 years later from that point. I'm going through a stack of resumes as I'm getting ready to hire a social worker. And I'm in Germany. I'm looking through resumes, and I'm like, wow, I got a short list, and I've already narrowed it down, and I started looking at the candidates. And once I chose a candidate, I realized, wait a minute, this name sounds really familiar. So I called to offer the job to Mr. Durr. And I said, now that we got that all out of the way, would you happen to be Sergeant Durr from Fort Benning, Georgia? And he said, yeah. I said, what years were you there? And he gave me the years. And I was like, oh my God, I was your private. I was your
Crazy.
Private.
Yes.
And so this man is the person who made me go to college against my will.
Like, how does that even happen? You can even make it up.
You can't make it up.
Yeah.
And so he made me go to college. He made me go. I didn't have a car. He drove me down to the education center on the base. And 8 years later, I select him. I recruit him to come be one of my social workers at the clinic in
Crazy.
Germany.
I love that story.
Wow,
That's amazing.
man.
Yeah.
I love
So I've
that.
had this, this experience in life in which I've been able to, remarkably stay in touch with people in some way, form, or fashion. This was completely unintended.
Right.
Yeah.
But to be able to offer him a job, right? This was the man who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And to be able to offer him a job, was amazing. And so I think he's doing well. And
I hope so. That's awesome.
so in the social workspace, and again, that ripple effect of being able to give back. There's so many stories
Yeah, I
of
can
that in
imagine.
my life. Like it's just amazing.
Yeah, things that are just way too coincidental. Like, it's way too coincidental. And like, I don't believe in that anymore. And
I don't believe in coincidences at all. Like, things happen for a reason.
Yeah.
yeah, no matter how, good or bad,
Yeah.
I do believe that.
Yeah.
I guess, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, or is there any sort of message, or if you were to, I think I asked somebody else this, maybe, I think Jenner Lucky asked this towards the end, like, if there was one message you could give to, even if it's to a particular group of people or to anybody, what would you have to say if you were to?
That's a difficult question.
It
I would say see people, and it sounds simple, but in much of my life, I've been unseen. Like, people either didn't want to see me, they didn't see me, or they didn't like what they saw, and so see people. I made it a point when I was in the White House to, it's easy to see the politicians, it's easy to see the leadership, it's easy to see cabinet secretaries or the vice president or the first lady or the president. How about seeing the janitor, the custodian?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I made it a point to learn their stories. The lady who cleaned my office in the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, amazing woman. Son was a soldier as well, serving in Hawaii. I made sure I knew her name.
Cool.
You got to see people because, as I talked to her, I remember her saying, there's so many people who walk right past me every day and never say hello. I'm pushing a trash can. I'm not important. And everyone wants to feel valued. So in no uncertain terms should we, make the effort to see people as people, not by their titles, not by their rank, not by their position, not by how much money they have, not by their position in society, by societal norms. But see them as important and valued people, no matter who they are. That would be my message.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's incredible, man. Yeah.
That's very strong. Like, we talk about kind of the same thing what you just said, treat like the custodian as you would treat the CEO, almost like same respect. We're all people. We all put our pants on the same. That's what someone said to you, I think, not long ago. Because we're sometimes nervous talking to people like you because we hold you so high and they're like, just calm down. It's okay.
Yeah.
They put their pants on just like you. Right. But I love what you just said. I think more people need to really think deep about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, no, that's really powerful, man. And I think that would eliminate so many problems in this world if people would just do that, the vast majority of them. But then again, I don't think, especially when it comes to media and stuff, I think we need a massive overhaul with media and whatnot. It's so negative, and it fuels off that. But yeah, I really appreciate this conversation. We're at about an hour and 53. So this is awesome. And, I could sit here all day long.
Awesome, yeah. Yeah, no kidding.
Hopefully, because I have goals, I have dreams, and I'll talk about that on the podcast because it's a pretty positive dream. I said, for example, there's a school across the street from my house for sale, and I was like, how cool would it be to turn it into like a nonprofit for like kids that are going through not good situations at home. Not necessarily for like a behavior school, but just, to show them, kind of like life coaching, but for children that may have potential, just something, just because there's so many kids like you that are going through, there's more grandparents in at least the area I live in. There's more grandparents raising kids right now than parents, because parents are all on drugs. Like that's a very serious situation. And if those kids had like some sort of figure or, I would love to start like a little nonprofit or something like that, and utilize could even utilize the podcast to help promote it or something. But that was kind of like a long-term goal of mine, just because it's obvious, for obvious reasons, it's very close at home for me. Yeah, and I'm very, very confident that things will continue to excel for us, and I just hope we're able to just give back and help people, because we fully intend on just reinvesting in this. And, just get
that's the whole point of the podcast, is to help people.
Yeah.
To reach them.
Yeah. But man, if I could somehow find a way to do this full time, it would be a very, very different ball game.
Someday.
Yeah. But
We've only been doing it since November, so
we need. And you've already had a success. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to sit with you, because our values align.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, coming
definitely.
from divergent backgrounds, experiences, all of those things, to just be a beacon of light for other people to be able to see.
Yeah.
A path that maybe they didn't know existed. See something different, see the world different.
Not feel alone.
Not feel alone. Knowing that other people have weathered that storm, have been in that fire, in that valley, is profoundly impactful. And without seeing that sermon, it's easy to listen to a sermon, but without seeing that sermon, it's hard for people to imagine what life can be.
Yeah. Yep. And if somebody could listen to a story like this and not go through adversity and learn from it, then great. But the problem is I feel like you have to experience those hard times. And if you can change your perspective to think, well, even while I'm going through hard times now, there's times where I'm like, I'm going to be all right. This is going to help me. I'm meant to go through this. Like, I legitimately make those rationally.
Like you grow differently though. Like, who are we talking about? Like, you have this straight road that you can go down, or you have this other road that's like that, the straight one, you don't really collect anything. It's like the easy road. But this road, and you'll grow differently than this road. You will 100%. And you're going to bounce off, the little turns and twists, and you're going to pull, important experience or knowledge and whatever it is, emotionally and physically, maybe, I don't know. But this road is the road you're going to have to go down to grow right, to be who you're supposed to be.
Right.
So it's like everyone wants the easy road. No one wants to go through that stuff, but you have to go through that stuff to, you wouldn't be who you are today probably if you didn't go through any of that stuff that you went through.
Oh no, and I keep that pain with me because I need it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I need it to be able to appreciate what I have.
Exactly.
And I needed to be able to, and I think this is, God's message to me, to be able to tell that story.
Yes.
Without that pain, I don't have a story to tell.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's vitally important. I think it's critical that we have people who have accomplished something in their lives to be able to say, these are the things that I had to go through to get there. Because what most people see is they see a resume, and it can be it can be intimidating, right? To see someone's pedigree and say, oh, wow, this person has amassed this or they've done that. But I think once you peel back the onion and you start to see the stressors, the fights, the failures over and over and over again that it takes to make someone successful, then people can, they can approach life differently. They can say, this is just going to be another part of my testimony.
Yeah.
I not to drag things out, but I just want to mention this. At my last interview you mentioned resume, and it got me thinking, because I don't have the best resume aside from job experience because I have no college degree. And, I've always been so insecure about that, but especially going into a system engineering role and then to, now a security engineering role. But my last interview, the last question the lady that was interviewing me asked me was, if you could do anything in the world, money was no object, what would it be? I'm like, well, and I started to mention money somehow. She's like, no, money's no object. I'm like, all right. I'm like, I have an answer. And because I didn't take me any time to answer the question. She's like, really? She seemed surprised. She's like, normally people have, take a little time to
think about it.
Like, no, I'm like, I have an answer. It's kind of vague, but I would like to be able to help people. If I could make a living helping people, like that's what I would like to do. And essentially she, I don't know if I actually told her this, but she essentially planted that seed for what we're doing right now, really. Because I thought, what's helped me the most is just sitting down, having an authentic conversation with other people.
Right. Right.
So like, that's really where all this stemmed from. And then now I'm like, man, like I want to be able to be the person that I need right now for other people, like somebody that, like you taking the time to talk to us, it's somebody that I could have a conversation with and be like, this person's a real person. They're a genuine person with a beautiful soul. How can I help them?
Right.
And because if things keep going the way they're going for us, I think I'll eventually be able to do that. And like being able to have, I don't want to say power, I don't like that word, but being able to have the power to be able to facilitate setting somebody up and helping them with a career, like, kind of like you offering that job to, your former sergeant there. Like that's incredible. And I would love to be able to give back to other people, but.
And see, here's the thing, and I know we got to wrap it up here, but I used to have two lists that I kept. I kept one list of all these people that harmed me along the way.
Okay.
I also kept a list of all the people who helped me along the way. And at every point in my career, let's say when I became an officer, or when I became this, I would send them an email to say, if it were not for you, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
They were planting seeds for trees that are going to provide shade that they'll never sit under.
Yeah.
That's our job.
Yeah.
To plant those seeds for those trees that are going to provide shade for people that will never sit under.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's selfless.
Man.
It's who we are.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I wanted to sit down with you.
Well, can we like say that in our other episodes and stuff? Because I love that.
Yeah.
We'll say that you said it, but that's so.
Yeah, that's incredible, man. I appreciate this so much. And it's like, we drove 6 hours. It was worth it.
We would have driven 10.
We honestly, we haven't, because of what we've had going on, we haven't gotten away for, this is the farthest we've been from our home in 2 years.
Well, I think you owe yourself a trip to Washington, D.C. at this point.
I think so too.
Enjoy. Wow.
Can you just go to Arlington anytime you want? How does that work?
Arlington Cemetery? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love to go, me personally, I like to go see, and I'll keep talking, but I love, I go to see most recently to Colin Powell's headstone, because for me, he was a mentor. And it was like the last lesson of leadership. He was the Secretary of State. He was a chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff.
You like interacted with him a lot?
Oh, yeah. Oh. And he was a 4-star general and all of those things. If you go to his headstone, it's just like everybody else's, right in line. And you'll see in Arlington Cemetery, you can be perched on the hill. You can have this big grandiose, and some people have done that. His is right in line with everyone else who just happened to pass at that time, and it says Colin Powell General. That's wow. I mean, just an amazing. So anyway, yes, to answer your question, you can go anytime, but you have to go see the monuments.
Okay.
All of these things are, and this weekend is a beautiful weekend.
Yeah.
So the sun is shining. Yes. DC can be, abhorrently gray. It can be cold. It can be all those things. Yeah. You chose the right weekend to come down. So
happens for a reason. Yeah, right?
Hey, you chose it for us.
Right, actually, you did. Thank you.
I truly love Washington, D.C. If you have enough time, go to Georgetown. wow, there's just so many. It's just such a beautiful city. It really, really, really is.
Cool.
The
I'm excited to
Capitol,
see
the
everything.
National
Oh my
Mall, everything. You know, and you don't have to. It's a smaller city, so you don't have to spend a lot of time.
Right.
But make sure you see all of the major areas.
Cool. Yeah,
I'm
we'll
excited
definitely go
to-
that route.
Yeah.
I wonder if we'd be better off taking a bus and parking our car somewhere or just driving around. Is the traffic pretty bad?
So the traffic is not so bad on the weekend, but finding parking is going to be an issue. And parking is expensive. So I would, if it were me, when I lived in DC, I only took public transportation. The bus, I don't know the bus system, but the metro system is robust and it gets you to everywhere you need to be.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
So I would just, if I had a recommendation, I would find parking at your friend's house, you know, and then getting to the metro and going from there.
Cool.
Oh, that'd
Yeah,
be
we'll
fun.
go that route.
Oh.
Well, yeah,
And
man.
take a lot of pictures.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You're not kidding.
we do that
My
anyway.
phone's gonna get full.
Right,
Yes.
right. And then definitely go by the White House, you know,
Yes.
do all the things. It's kind of funny. You know, I don't have the access, so I would be just like you in this situation.
Yeah.
I would have to like stand behind the
Oh,
gate.
yeah. That's what we're gonna do. Selfies everywhere.
Right. But yeah, the city where everything is decided,
Yeah.
everything happens, all the power is concentrated. But the history of it, you know, the first thing I remember, and this is interesting, I remember going to the White House and remember that slaves actually built the White House. Right. And so the contrast of that, the juxtaposition of those two realities, but being happy to serve there, being blessed to serve there. You know, I just think that it's a magical, magical place. So yeah.
I am thankful that we're out here and thankful talking to you and
Please enjoy. I'm not going to rob any more of your time. You got to get down there.
we'll just throw everything in the car.
Yeah, so if you can enjoy something tonight, definitely enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know, keep things on the Georgetown would be like the added benefit maybe, but definitely go see the major monuments.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do, man.
My daughter would be so mad if we didn't. She's like, you need to like stay. I'm
It's
glad
only,
you're
what,
staying.
hour or so?
Yeah, so right now it's probably George Washington Monument should be about 55 minutes from here, 50 minutes or so. Yeah.
We can make that.
We'll definitely do that.
Yeah. We said we didn't bring changes of clothes other than our suit. So I'm like, we can go to Walmart and grab something quick.
Like I didn't bring
You don't
jeans
need
or anything.
You don't need any.
yeah. I mean, between if we were to overnight till tomorrow and stuff. But
Yeah, or just
Or just
I need
take
a
a shower.
toothbrush. I know.
Yeah.
I mean, no one's going to have seen you today and tomorrow.
No one knows us. Right?
yeah.
Shh, don't tell anyone.
Yeah, I definitely. The time that I came for the interview, I remember thinking that if nothing else, I had the opportunity to visit
Yes.
DC. So
Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, I will kill the recording part and
All right.
go
Awesome.
and yeah.
thank you guys for making the trip.